Chapter 19 of She and Allan. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. She and Allan by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 19. The Spell. Of our return to Kôr I need say nothing, except that in due course we reached that interesting ruin. The journey was chiefly remarkable for one thing, that on this occasion, I imagine for the first and last time in his life, Umslopogaas consented to be carried in a litter, at least for part of the way. He was, as I have said, unwounded, for the axe of his mighty foe had never once so much as touched his skin. What he suffered from was shock, a kind of collapse, since although few would have thought it, this great and utterly fearless warrior was at bottom a nervous, highly strung man. It is only the nervous that climb the highest points of anything, and this is true of fights as of all others. That fearful fray with Rezu had been a great strain on the Zulu. As he put it himself, "The wizard has sucked the strength out of him," especially when he found that owing to his armour he could not harm him in front, and owing to his cunning could not get at him behind. Then it was that he conceived the desperate expedient of leaping over his head and smiting backwards as he leapt. A trick, he told me, that he had once played years before when he was young, in order to break a shield ring and reach one who stood in the centre. In this great leap over Rezu's head, Umslopogaas knew that he must succeed or be slain, which in turn would mean my death and that of the others. For this reason he faced the shame of seeming to fly in order to gain the high ground, whence alone he could gather the speed necessary to such a terrific spring. Well, he made it and thereby conquered, and this was the end. But as he said, it had left him "weak as a snake when it crawls out of his hole into the sun after the long winter sleep." Of one thing Umslopogaas added he was thankful, namely that Rezu had never succeeded in getting his arms round him, since he was quite certain that if he had, he would have broken him, "as a baboon breaks a mealie stalk." No strength, not even his, could have resisted the iron might of that huge gorilla-like man. I agreed with him who had noted Rezu's vast chest and swelling muscles, also the weight of the blows that had struck with the steel-shafted axe, which by the way, when I sought for it, was missing, stolen, I suppose, by one of the Amahagger. Whence did that strength come, I wondered, in one who from his face appeared to be old? Was there perchance after all some truth in the legend of Samson, and did it dwell in that gigantic beard and those long locks of his? It was impossible to say, and probably the man was but a Herculean freak, for that he was as strong as Hercules all the stories that I heard afterwards of his feats left little room for doubt. About one thing only was I certain in connection with him, namely that the tales of his supernatural abilities were the merest humbug. He was simply one of the representatives of the family of strong men, of whom examples are still to be seen doing marvellous feats all over the earth. For the rest, he was dead and broken up by those Amahagger bloodhounds before I could examine him, or his body armour either, and there was an end of him and his story. But when I looked at the corpse of poor Robertson, which I did as we buried it where he fell, and saw that though so large and sick that it was cleft almost in two by a single blow of Rezu's axe, I came to understand what the might of this savage must have been. I say savage, but I am not sure that this is a right description of Rezu. Evidently he had a religion of a sort, also imagination, as was shown by the theft of the white woman to be his queen, by his veiling of her to resemble Ayesha whom he dreaded, by the intended propitiatory sacrifice, by the guard of women sworn to her service who slew the priest that tried to kill her and afterwards committed suicide when they had failed in their office, and by other things. All this indicated something more than savagery, perhaps survivals from a forgotten civilization, or perhaps native ability on the part of an individual ruler. I do not know, and it matters nothing. Rezu is dead and the world is well rid of him, and those who want to learn more of his people can go to study such as remain of them in their own habitat, which for my part I never wish to visit any more. During our journey to Kôr, poor Inez never stirred. Whenever I went to look at her in the litter, I found her lying there with her eyes open and a fixed stare upon her face which frightened me very much, since I began to fear lest she should die. However, I could do nothing to help her, except urge the bearers to top speed. So swiftly did we travel down the hill and across the plain that we reached Kôr just as the sun was setting. As we crossed the moat I perceived old Billali coming to meet us. This he did with many bows, keeping an anxious eye upon the litter which he had learned contained Umslopogaas. Indeed his attitude and that of the Amahagger towards the two of us and even Hans thenceforward became almost abject, since after our victory over Rezu and his death beneath the axe, they looked upon us as half divine and treated us accordingly. "O mighty General," he said, "she who commands bids me conduct the lady who is sick to the place that has been made ready for her, which is near your own, so that you may watch over her if you will." I wondered how Ayesha knew that Inez was sick, but being too tired to ask questions, merely bade him lead on. This he did, taking us to another ruined house next to our own quarters, which had been swept, cleaned and furnished after a fashion, and moreover cleverly roofed in with mats, so that it was really quite comfortable. Here we found two middle-aged women of a very superior type, who Billali informed me were by trade nurses of the sick. Having seen her laid upon her bed, I committed Inez to their charge, since the case was not one that I dared to try to doctor myself, not knowing what drug of the few I possessed should be administered to her. Moreover, Billali comforted me with the information that soon She who commands would visit her and make her well again, as she could do. I answered that I hoped so, and went to our quarters, where I found an excellent meal ready cooked and with it a stone flagon, of the contents of which Billali said we were all three to drink by the command of Ayesha, who declared that it would take away our weariness. I tried the stuff, which was pale yellow in colour, like sherry, and for aught I knew might be poison, to find it most comforting, though it did not seem to be very strong to the taste. Certainly, too, its effects were wonderful, since presently all my great weariness fell from me like a discarded cloak, and I found myself with a splendid appetite and feeling better and stronger than I had done for years. In short, that drink was a cocktail of the best, one of which I only wish I possessed the recipe, though Ayesha told me afterwards that it was distilled from quite harmless herbs and not in any sense a spirit. Having discovered this, I gave some of it to Hans, also to Umslopogaas, who was with the wounded Zulus, who, we found, were progressing well towards complete recovery, and lastly to Goroko, who also was worn out. On all of these the effect of that magical brew proved most satisfactory. Then having washed I ate a splendid dinner, though in this respect Hans, who was seated on